Maneva na sema PENDREAM TV. PENDREAM TV de osia dem yopo.
You are once again welcome to PENDREAM TV, the only channel that brings you the best and latest updates in politics. If you are new here, please don't forget to subscribe, hit the notification bell, like and also share for other new members to watch. You can leave your comments at the comment section as well, or send us a voice note on 0277128777. Today, Dr. John Osae Endorses is also saying the 24 hours economy is a better policy and you should give it a try. He also give so many outline about how it helps him in USA and other outside countries. Without much ado, join me listening to what he said about it. Thank you.
Back to 101. My name is Bridget Otu. We're talking about the 24-hour economic or economy policy by former President Mahama. It's a proposal we're talking about to see how we can make it better. But a lot of people are naturally excited about it. They want to see if it can work. I've heard Mr. Joe Jackson, who is the chief operations officer of Dalex Finance, say it is feasible. And then John Osae Endorses in the studio here is also talking about, yes, we should give it a chance. Like, what have we got to lose? At the end of the positive thing is we'll have a lot of people being, employed into the system if it works, of course. And that's where we were on the point that we were on before the break. Dr. Sapon, again, we talked about cost before the break, and then I wanted to hint on Dr. Bawumia's campaign approach of saying that the 24-hour economy by President Mahamadu doesn't make sense. He doesn't know what he is talking about, and that chop bars work for 24 hours. First, when you heard that comment, what did you think?
I think my initial reaction was, well, I understand reducing it to that, right? I mean, you have to
reducing it to what?
To a flippant statement that says we already have it. This won't work. It's coming from former President John Mahama, etc., etc. But I think it's also part of the process, right? I mean, I'm a realist enough to know that politics, there's a certain amount that you would have to take some punches, for even whatever good idea you have. So that is to be expected. I suspect that, or I hope that after the own work, it's not a good idea, etc., etc., some alternative. Because for me, I believe that is what we should boil our elections down to. A fight over ideas and alternatives. So if one person says unemployment is a problem, this is the way I think we should go. If the other side thinks, okay, yeah, unemployment is a problem, but I'm not sure your idea is the way to go. Here is my idea. And then, we debate it, we subject it to scrutiny, etc. And voters ultimately get to make that choice of, do I want to take my chances with option A, or do I want to take my chances with option B? Yes, there are some who would vote based on their party identification regardless. All of those things are part of the electoral campaign and elections. But I would hope that beyond the initial discard the idea, we would then also see that alternative from Vice President that says, here is my better vision, here is my better idea. And he's not I don't doubt that him and his team would be able to also craft what they think their policy solution should be. I mean, he's a well-trained economist. So I'm sure he understands these things. But
is it that he's against it, or it's because he came from the former president? From where you see it, what do you see?
Probably a combination of the two, right? Probably he thinks, well, maybe not necessarily a 24-hour economy, but some version or maybe some other idea is the direction in which we should go. And then, of course, former President John Mahama is his main opponent when it comes to the election. So you not only, in any election, you not only sort of knock down the ideas of your opponent, but you also have to knock down your opponent as well. Right, it's you know how politics is. Right, I have to both say your ideas are not good, and you, the person, also can't do it. I'm the better person, and I'm the one with the better ideas.
But is that a good strategy, I mean, currently being employed by Dr. Bawumia, because he seems to be on an attacking mode. It's almost as though he is the opposition leader and not the person in government.
Right.
Is that a good strategy as a political scientist?
I mean, you also have to understand the difficulty that, you know, that he is in.
What difficulty is that?
I have said that part of the challenge is he would have to, you know, the economic situation we found ourselves in, some of the challenges the country has faced. You know, Dr. Bawumia, Vice President, head of EMT, he's been part of this government. So he has a difficult job of explaining to the Ghanaian voter what happened. Is the question I've been asking. Anytime I look at, you know, the hope, the goodwill and everything from 2016 to 2017 and some of the challenges, I always say, what happened? So that's one of his major tasks, is to help the Ghanaian voter reconcile all the policy arguments that was made in 2016.
Which he was key. In fact,
Precisely. He was the main voice.
Driver, yes.
So he would have to reconcile 2016 with what has happened and bridge that gap, right? I mean, and I'm sure he can come up with plausible explanations. It's up to the voter to decide whether they wholeheartedly accept it or not. And so that's the challenge that he finds himself in. I also say that in doing that, he would have to walk a fine line between doing that and also not sort of appearing that he's throwing his own government under the bus, right? Would he have to, at some point, maybe admit that some of it was the government's own doing? And if he does that, what message does that send? So he's in a tricky...
Isn't that the biggest challenge and problem with Dr. Bawumia at the moment?
Yeah.
As in, there's a certain stubbornness to admitting or taking responsibility to the current challenges that we find. He seems to rather say, look, everything is, yeah, we may have, but we're fine. Why is it so hard, you know? And I will just extend that to politicians. Why is it so hard for them to admit that, okay, we got it wrong, or we've made mistakes, we could do better? Instead of saying, okay, it's fine, it's the opposition that doesn't see the good in what we're doing. Why? Why is that so hard for politicians and Dr. Bawumia in particular?
Well, if you also look at particularly elections as the key mechanism that your citizens use to either, quote unquote, reward you or punish you, right? As a politician, you always want rewards. You don't want punishment. Punishment meaning you don't want to be voted out of power. You want to be kept in power by the voters. So part of that psyche then is, do I really want to go to the voters and say, okay, I was wrong, I made mistakes, etc., etc. I even wonder how many voters, even themselves, the voters themselves, would forgive you for that sort of public admission that some of the things that you said could be done were not able to be done, or do you see what I'm saying? That's why I suspect that most of the time what politicians do is they find reasons for the challenges. They never would frame it as failures. They would, you know, political language is always, these are the challenges that we face, here are the reasons, etc., etc. But if we do this and I'm better than the other person, that's always how campaigns would always be phrased. I mean, even if you think back to the US, 2012, Obama's re-election.
Right.
I mean, he was facing a difficult re-election because
Absolutely.
the economy hadn't fully picked up and recovered. Now, he in 2008 had said, look, just vote us into power. We would get this thing done by the end of my first term. Up comes 2012 re-election. And he had to say, well, I didn't know that the recovery would take that long.
Yeah.
You know, so I think it's just something that goes through the minds of all politicians to say, I have to find a different way of communicating with voters, otherwise they would punish me. But I think ultimately voters can also read in between the lines of what politicians say to them, and can at some point make that decision that says, I keep you or I don't I don't keep you. Of course, you'd always have your party's base, your diehard supporters who would go with you. It's those in the middle who can switch their votes, then that gets to say, okay, we accept the explanation, or we don't, we accept the narrative, or we don't, and we move on. And as I keep saying, for me, that is the hurdle that Dr. Bawumia needs to jump over, which is how does he craft his campaign narrative in a way that recognizes the challenges and the difficulties, but at the same time also offering a way out that says, look, I understand all of the pinch points that Ghanaians are facing. I believe if we do these things, with me as president, it would work. Now,
how does he do that? I want you to answer that. It's not a very rhetorical question you posed. How does he do that? How does he frame it? Because he had attempted to do that when he mounted the platform and said that, you will recall that in 2016, I said, if the fundamentals are weak, the exchange rate will expose you. And then he comes back to say, but to jump to that conclusion is a what logic? And then he was seen as a liar because of how he explained it. So how does he? I've given you one example. So how does he? To say, okay, we're not going to toll because I've worked at the Bank of Ghana. The money is there. If we don't toll the road to be able to, we just need to toll the road, and we're fine. We'll construct. How does he do that? So how does he craft the message? That's the question.
You can craft it by, so a number of things have happened, or a major thing. It has its limitations. Let me preface that. But is there a way of, for example, saying, look, COVID, and that the government has used COVID. Now, there's some truth to that, but I also think there's some limitation to the COVID argument, right? Because we were also not left on our own devices when it came to COVID, right?
Yes.
There was some support.
Cushion from the World Bank.
And that cushioning was not enough. Well, if it was not enough, right?
Well, if you look at the expenditure, which they haven't been able to provide, how the monies were spent, people are angry at it as well.
Exactly. So if that was not enough, if the policies that you tried requires more time, maybe rethinking, maybe reframing, adjusting, all of those things. But that for me is, at least if I were him running, that is how I would craft my message, which acknowledges that Ghanaians are feeling some real pinch points, that some of the policies tried did not yield the kinds of benefits that you hoped it would yield. But you also think that giving the chance, some policies may still work, a retweaking, some new policies may work. And you leave it up to the voters, you take your chances with them. I think the one thing that, in my humble opinion, and I call the MPP people my mother's party's people, right? I keep saying, I think one of the things that they haven't fully embraced yet is the idea that the prospect of a John Mahama presidency again, from my reading of the political climate, doesn't necessarily, quote unquote, scare people, right? So the phrase, the alternative is scary, that's not the alternative, I don't think carries the same political weight anymore than it did a couple of years ago. Maybe even in 2020, it may have had a little bit, but when you read comments, particularly in social media spaces, when when I sit in an Uber and you talk to, people, it's like, well, we lived, we survived. So we would live and we would survive again. So I think for me, that is really not a strong selling point now for them. It really has to be acknowledging the pinch points and showing how a Dr. Bawumia presidency would be different than a Nana Addo Dankwa Akufo-Addo presidency. And maybe that could be one of his saving graces.
Okay. Would the NPP have been better off not presenting Dr. Bawumia as president, as flag bearer?
Not necessarily. The only reason, one of the other reasons I say that too is, look, he worked hard for it. People talk about...
You mean he paid for it?
Oh, Bridget, this is a man who came into the party in 2008, right?
Yeah.
But he's really worked hard for the party. He's taken all of the punches. I mean, he's taking a beating for his party.
With punches, people have had haircut. 30% of their investments have gone off.
And rightly
That's
so.
not fine. It's the people who have taken the punches,
Bridget,
not him.
Yes, and rightly
He
so.
rather has inflicted wounds.
Exactly, and people are punching back, and rightly so, right? But I mean, when was the last time you heard him? So, I mean, he's been very careful not to say much, you know, about the economy, all of the things that are said, you know, but he really made sure that he built for himself a strong constituency within the party. That for me is what led to him. Yes, I always knew that. But
that wasn't overwhelming. I mean, he had 113. Kennedy Japan had over 70,000. I mean,
but still, right?
So you're saying he worked hard not to be rejected?
No, he worked hard to win. I mean, he was. No, he
worked hard not to be rejected in the sense that for Kennedy Japan, right, who did not have as much resources as by resources I don't mean even money, but resourcing, having the state kind of resources behind you, right? Almost looking as if, I mean, the whole establishment candidates thing, for him to get that over 37%, I mean.
Yes, I mean, yes, he did well.
So, but Doc, because I feel like you're not speaking to the stats, because it looks like he struggled. He literally fought to not lose it.
But he had to fight for it though, right, Bridget? I mean, if you look at the NPP,
if your party gives you that kind of response, that kind of like lukewarm response.
Well, I don't think it's but Bridget, think about the NPP since 1992, right? This is a party that has a history of very competitive primary elections, right? To the point where a certain vice president was not even chosen as flag bearer. Right. So it goes to show you that they won't hand it to you, they won't give it to you automatically, even if the establishment is behind you. So to have pulled 6 out of 10 voters, for me, it was no mean thing. And think about it. He visited every single constituency, spoke to every delegate. I mean, he cultivated the delegates to make sure. So imagine he didn't do any of that. And for an establishment candidate, he didn't even take that for granted. Right? He didn't sit back and say, you know, it looks like...
But that's because people, the delegates felt like presenting him would mean a defeat for the New Patriotic Party, in an easy defeat perhaps in the 2024 election. That's why I asked, I mean, the question about a different candidate would have a different campaign, would say, look, I was not part of, this is Nanado's vice president, right? But I was not part of it, right? So a different candidate like Kennedy Japan could have easily said that, right?
But he's also NPP, he's also part of the government. So yes, he may not be, quote unquote, as close as a vice president, but he's also a member of parliament. He's speaking for the party. Do you see what I'm saying? I mean, yes, when I watched the Honorable Kennedy, he found a way during the primary campaign to hit at his, at his own party, point out some of their challenges and feelings. But he's a little further away. But no matter what, any MPP candidate, right, especially if they served in government, would have faced the same challenge because of the economic challenges.
So Bawumia was the best.
So
no, not per the votes, but I saying you don't think that he's hard to sell compared to any of the other 9?
I don't think
or the other 4.
I don't think he's.
So you think they had so the others had the same chance as Bawumia?
Oh, the same chance to win?
Yes.
No. To win the primary.
No, in Ghana. No. I mean the national election. So I'm looking at the national election.
No, the national. No, I don't think all of them had the same chance to win the national election. I mean, there was a point where I thought, okay, Honorable Kennedy, particularly because of the nature of his politics, right? He punches hard, he fights hard. He would have given President John Mahama a run for his money, right? So the nature of his politics is what would have made me say, okay.
Sounds like a grassroots man.
Except that I also don't like the adversarial politics, right? It troubles me when politics is too... That's why for me, Dr. Bawumia was the right candidate for the party.
Right.
Now, as to whether he would be able to jump the hurdle from party to national and win the presidency, that is a very difficult proposition, which is why I keep saying he has quite a task ahead of him. Wow. To convince Ghanaians that, look, I can make this work. Because all people will do is, and you've been seeing that, They will just show his tweets, his posts,
his videos,
right? And
they're compelling.
At some point, he would have to speak about the economy. He cannot forever stay away from speaking about the economy.
Is it a bad strategy that he's employed so far, not to talk about the economy, which was the main thing that endeared him to people, to literally vote for them in 2016, and of course they gave them a second in 20.
Yeah, I personally don't think it's a good strategy, right? At some point, look, you are going to get the punches anyway, so take them now. Speak about the economy. Let's enter into 2024. You can't run away forever from the economy. I'm sure he would be able to find an explanation, a narrative, but whatever it is, at some point he would have to engage in the media spaces. He would have to give a major economics policy speech like he did the last time and speak to it, because that is what Ghanaians are feeling. Look, 2022, the most recent Afrobarometer survey, the number one most important issue was managing the economy. So he definitely would have to at some point speak about the economy.
I think over the weekend there was a post, I think it was the women's organizer, one NPP, who said Dr. Bawumia was opposed to the e-levy, the electronic transaction levy. They just dropped it to see reaction, I think. Why can't he say it himself? Why are they using these third parties to kind of test the waters and see if Ghanaians would react to it? Why can't he say it?
I mean,
if he were against it, should have let us know, at least.
But Bridget, ideally, yes. But in reality, sitting vice president, head of the economic management team, member of cabinet, member of government, right? How do you come out and publicly say you oppose a major policy move by your government to try and raise revenue because of a major budget shortfall that we were facing of almost, I think the deficit was about 30. The projected deficit, even with e-levy, was about 37 billion, right?
Wow.
I mean, there are times where you have to be a team player. Now, I think there's been some report that said he never said he was opposed to it. But again, this is why I keep saying, if I were the people on his team, I won't wait too long. Now that he's won the nomination, the first things, I mean, his nomination, when he won the nomination, he gave a speech, a good speech where it was more, here's my personal story of triumph, that ultimately today someone like me can become NPP flag bearer. Beautiful, good story. But there's the second half of that story that he needs to tell, and he has to engage in a conversation about the economy.
Right, and soon we've come to the end of his, yes, Dr. John Osae Endorses actually came with 2 of his books, and you are working on the third one, right? Yes, so what's the title?
The third one, I can't give you the title yet, but it's about
the subject.
Former President John Mahama.
Oh, wow.
Yes.
So these are the 2 books. I hope these are mine.
Yes, these are yours.
So he's going to sign them for me, but let me just read them to you. The first one I love. This says, note from the public square, what Ghanaians said and how they felt during the Kufuor's presidency. Notes from the public square, what Ghanaians said and how they felt during Kufuor's presidency. And the second one, I love this, says 5 presidents, 8 elections, 30 years later, how Ghanaians see their democracy. You can get somewhere.
Amazon.
Where? Amazon. Oh, yes. Amazon. So he's online. You should dig it up. Bawumia says we are working 24/7. ECG works 24/7. So the 24-hour economy is already in progress. So we don't need to listen, right? Okay. So that's it. My name is Bridget Otu. Again, go on our social media platforms and put all your comments there. And we'll be happy to read them. Yes. See you again next week. Have a good evening. Hello there, welcome to One on One. My name is Bridget Osu. Thank you very much for joining us. Today on One on One, we are going to talk about the most topical, trendy, topical, trendy, I think I'm lost for words on that, policy introduced or which will be introduced by the former president, John Dramani Mahama, should Ghanaians give him the nod in 2024. And that's the 24-hour economy. Some say it might not work. In fact, it's the government and its appointees and the vice president who are saying that it won't work. But there are experts who say it is feasible, but certain things must be put in place. What are those things? My guest is an experienced political scientist, over a decade experience talking about these things. He has an article which I'll make reference to in a bit. So yes, fasten your seatbelts, because the next for the next 50 minutes, we'll be talking about the 24-hour economic policy by former President John Dramani Mahama. We'll also talk about the approach by the Vice President, Dr. Mahmoud Bawumia, in attacking the policy. Some say he's popularizing the policy, as NDC did free SHS in 2015-2016 elections. We'll be right back to look at the details.
In this land of opportunity, there is very much we can do. There is much we can do even now to turn things around. And I am heartened that my recent suggestion of operating a 24-hour economy in Ghana has been heard by the finance minister, as he mentioned in his recent budget statement, in the form of what he called the ninth economy. However, my idea of a 24-hour economy goes beyond just a ninth economy, which is to boost tourism, as explained by the Honorable Ken Oforiatta. I envision a 24-hour economy where hospitality facilities, filling stations, manufacturers, construction companies, garbage collection companies, mining and extractive industries, agro-processing industries, harbors and ports, financial services, digital startups, and BPOs will operate preferably a 3-shift system 24/7 in an atmosphere of safety and security. Heightened security needed for a 24-hour economy will also provide for safer cities and thereby, in effect, boost tourism. This 24-hour economy initiative I propose will be voluntary. It will not be imposed. Businesses will be encouraged to sign up with tax incentives provided for them and enhanced security and lower electricity tariffs after peak hours. Special meters will be employed to provide what is known as time of use tariff to deliver cheaper power to such businesses during especially the hours of 10 a.m. and 6 a.m. The 24-hour economy I propose is for jobs, jobs, and more jobs. And to render it simply, ejumano kofi beyebi, na sali fonso ayebi, na enyonam ayebi, na kote onso ayene akano.
Today, I hear John Mahama has a new idea that he wants a 24-hour economy. I say, I don't know where he got the idea from, but it is not a bright idea. The 24-hour economy cannot be legislated by government. Today, there are many businesses that are already open for 24 hours. Hospitals are open for 24 hours. You can buy electricity 24 hours. But because of digitalization, you can transfer money for 24 hours. You can receive money for 24 hours. There are many chop bars that are open for 24 hours. The police is working for 24 hours. Security services are working for 24 hours. So what is this 24-hour economy that you want to bring? It is purely an issue for any business. If you feel you will make money opening 24 hours, there is no law preventing you from opening. But this is one idea that John Mahama thinks he has brought. It is a bad idea. It is an idea that has not been thought through. It is a bad idea. And so I want you to compare me and John Mahama. Who who has the ideas to transform this economy? Who has the ideas? Who has the ideas? Yes. The track record of John Mahama doesn't show innovative thinking. It doesn't show ideas. The track record of Dr. Bawumia is idea after idea after idea after idea after idea. That is the difference. I will, and I tell you, I have my own priorities and I will have my own vision. When I become president, I will bring more ideas, and you will hear about them very soon. Thank you very much. God bless you. God bless our homeland. God bless our homeland, Ghana.
We intend to implement a 24-hour economy. And by this, we will provide incentives in terms of reduction in corporate taxes and other exemptions to businesses that will sign up to the 24-hour economy initiative. And if we remember, in the past, but then we must also look at the security side and make sure that we provide them with security. Because if you remember, in the past, filling stations used to work 24 hours. Unfortunately, armed robbers started attacking them, and because of that, they all closed at about 10 o'clock. And so if we're able to provide them with adequate security, businesses and services like that, there's no reason why they can't operate 24 hours. And we'll give them the tax incentives to be able to do so. We'll identify and promote strategic growth areas such as IT with a targeted $3 billion investment and drive an aggressive infrastructure development under our Big Push program. We will shift attention from the macro economy to the micro and focus on growth in the real sector instead of just on macroeconomic stability. Additionally, we'll support the TUC and organized labor to expand its current investments and establish new joint businesses and ventures with third parties to also provide employment to our people.
And the Vice President is saying that he understands the region. He says this 24-hour economy. Hey, my brothers, when we work in our farms and we are tired in the night, we have to sleep with our wives. We have to be with our wives. In the night, you want us also to go and be farming, and then people will come and take our wives away. Hey, now we have to be careful about this 24-hour thing.
My guest is Dr. Osae Kwapon. He's a political scientist and also a fellow of the Center for Democratic Development, Ghana. Thank you very much for joining us on One on One.
Thank you very much.
I will talk about your piece, but the issue that is currently dominating headlines is the 24-hour economic policy. But this statement by the Upper East Regional Minister, Stephen Yakubu, who says that the proposal by the former President, John Dramani Mahama, to introduce the 24-hour policy will mean that men will not have the opportunity to sleep with their wives because from farm they want to do that. And I listened to it, I laughed at first, but I also look at the danger in proposing that. Why is he deliberately sounding ignorant? Why?
Well, in as much as I hate to say this, sometimes that's also the nature of politics, right? That with good policy ideas, the way sometimes you knock it down is if you can reduce it to a sound bite, or you can reduce it to some very practical everyday issue that, quote unquote, the ordinary person can relate to. Right? So if you were to go to a particular segment or section of the society and you want to, discuss the intricate details of it, high-level policies, things like that, there's assumption that maybe they won't understand. Right? But if you relate it to an everyday life activity or experience, they will be able to understand that. But to get them to relate, it's unfortunate that that is the example that he ended up using. I think I saw it on someone's page on Facebook.
Right.
And one of the comments that someone made was that, well, that's the way you quote unquote, talk to the ordinary person to understand some of these things. But for me, then, it also assumes that the average voter is not intelligent enough.
It's stupid, literally.
Right, to understand some of these things. And I think it's an unfortunate mischaracterization.
But is there some level of, are you saying then that, I mean, yes, I don't agree that the voters are stupid, but are you saying that that kind of one-liners work? And in this case, a 24-hour economy, right, will put it in people's minds that we're going to work for 24 hours, and so we might. Are you saying that it works in your area?
So you can reduce it to sound bites in positive ways, right? So look at how all of a sudden it's the 24-hour economy, right? And that's how we've been framing all of the conversations. Now, in some people's mind, then, what does it really mean, right? Does it mean that you're working around the clock?
Right.
So in the case of this minister,
right,
in his opposition, he's using this example. But I don't think the former president is intending that if you are a farmer, it means you should work 24 hours. So I think that is also part of what, as he and his team continue to push this idea, they would have to pick up on some of these nuances, because you also don't want people to think that what he's suggesting is nobody gets any break, nobody gets any sleep, and 24 hours around the clock, everybody is working, right? Okay. Everybody, meaning you, the individual, would not be on the job 24 hours.
Okay. So when you look at the policy as proposed now in the public domain for discussion by the former president, in your expert opinion, I know you've written about it, you're kind of like positive about it. You see prospects. So I want you to talk to me about where are the areas that are advantageous for Ghana to benefit from, because we cannot run, I know the entire country cannot run on 24 hours, but where are the places you see opportunities or advantages?
So if you think about an area like the industrial sector, right, particularly manufacturing, if you can package the incentives right. So I'll use a personal example.
Right.
When I finished O-level years ago in '92, I worked for a printing press, Commercial Associates printing press. We normally would work between the hours of 7, usually by 4:35 we'll be done. But when there was a lot of work, we would extend the hours. So sometimes we would work 6 to 6. If they were really overwhelmed, we could push it to about 8 p.m., right? So in a sector like that, where there is demand for his service or the things that he used to do, Commercial Associates, I don't see why, with the right set of incentives, given the volume of work at stake, he has to shut down by 5 or 6 p.m. because traditionally that is what we are used to, right? If he can extend the hours, which means that he can employ a few more people, he can give others maybe some extra hours in overtime, things like that, then you have, an enterprise going. People are employed, we are generating income, right? Government is providing that entity with the right type of incentives to be able to do that. So you can look at particular sections of the economy and say to yourself, which areas can we, as I said in my article, can we scale up? Can we leverage? Can we expand? Because perhaps they would like to, but if you don't offer the right incentives, then there's that sort of the holding back. Let's be honest. We've had some kind of economic activity at night. I'm sure everybody can tell a story about some Uber they took after midnight or some Kiliwili they bought at 11 p.m., things like that, right? But you can look at, sectors of the economy and say, okay, there's some potential here if we can really offer the right incentive. Because ultimately, government cannot create all the jobs, but government can put in the right incentives that allows the private sector to create jobs. And some of the incentives that former president is talking about are some of the incentives that, not even just in Ghana, but all over the world, governments use to entice private sector to engage in economic production, economic activities, which then leads to, jobs and a growing economy. I mean, if it all works out, yes, no policy is perfect. I'm sure it would run into some, they would have to, fine-tune all of the details. But in principle, I don't see why this is not an idea we can't give it a shot, especially because unemployment continues to be the major issue on the mind of Ghanaians, right?
Okay.
If you look at Afrobarometer, 8 different times that Afrobarometer has asked the most important issue, 5 times unemployment has been number one. Only once has it been infrastructure, and twice has it been management of the economy. Even in the year that infrastructure was number one, among the youth, unemployment was the number one issue for them, right? In the 2019 Afrobarometer, when the question was asked, when it comes to the youth, if government had more resources, where should they pump that in? Among the youth, 60% said job creation programs.
Wow.
And we've tried, right? I mean, over the years, we've tried all kinds of job creation efforts.
Right.
But the best approval for job creation in Afrobarometer was way back in 2008. And even that, it was just about 54%. If you average it across 9 rounds, no more than 37% have said they are satisfied with the way governments have been creating jobs. In the most recent Afrobarometer, it was at about 18%, right? So for me, when an issue is that important and that critical to the Ghanaian voter, and they keep saying we are not very satisfied with the way it is being dealt with, then any serious policy idea, like the 24-hour economy, should be entertained and subjected to, I mean, yes, we will have to debate it and
Absolutely.
things like that. But what do we have to lose
If we give it a shot.
if we give it a shot?
Right.
Because ultimately it is addressing a very important issue that Ghanaians keep saying. It's important to us, but we are not happy with the way governments, and not just this particular government, but governments over time have been trying, to solve this problem of unemployment.
Okay, so I like the story of the printing press. So we're going to, Ghana is our printing press.
Yeah.
And what your then boss did in ensuring that, okay, we don't just end at 5 p.m. He said he gave incentives. So if we're taking Ghana as that printing press, what are the specific things that needs to be done to give, so what incentives are those, right? And also one other big issue will be power. If you're talking manufacturing power, did you have lights then at the time? What were the things that made sure that the printing press worked effectively to go beyond the 5 p.m.?
Yep. So this was 92, and I worked there again in 96.
Right.
So power, constant power, and even when intermittently maybe the light may go off for whatever reason, commercial associates would have to kick in the generator.
Okay.
Well, that was added cost.
Right.
So if you were a smart government, realizing that an entity like commercial associates was very interested to keep production going, you say to yourself, what kind of tax burden does commercial associate carry? And can I reduce that tax burden? So in the few details that have been shared with this, former President Mahama talks about, tax incentives.
Right.
He also talks about cheaper power rates, at night.
Right.
So all of a sudden, a commercial associate can say, you know what? I don't have to wait to come back at 8 a.m. to finish this particular job. We can finish it between 9 and 2 or maybe 9 and 1, because even at this time, power is also cheaper.
Maybe half of
precisely,
right.
So that works. I'll give you another personal example. When I first went to the US, my first job was in a factory. We used to manufacture plastic bottles and containers for food and drug companies.
Right.
I worked third shift. So I go to work from 12 to 8 in the morning.
Right.
And then on Mondays, I work 8 p.m. till Tuesday, 8 a.m.
Right.
It was a 24-hour. It was an activity that took place within a 24-hour economy. For me, those are things that, yes, the context may be different, but you can learn from the design of these things in other jurisdictions and say, how can I make it work within the Ghanaian situation? So that's why I like the idea of, okay, maybe if we put together the right set of incentives, producers would respond positively, because then it becomes a win-win for everyone. No policy is ever smoothly implemented. I'm sure if he went and it's rolled out, there will definitely be some challenges. But for me, when you have a policy problem that continues to endure, you have to keep trying all ideas that would help you get out of it.
Okay.
And for me, I don't see why we shouldn't try the idea of a 24-hour economy.
Okay, so one would say it would require, I've heard some say it would require a complete overhaul of the systems we have. So for instance, there's this perception that we don't even use quality materials. So if I have a machine, the machine probably is also set to work maybe 8 hours. The machine, I'm not saying that things from China are not good. I'm talking about the grade. Probably they got the cheapest from China, right? And they've been using it. So they literally are managing it. So would that not be too expensive for us? What would be an answer to someone who say it will be too expensive for us because our machine currently, or the quality of the machinery we are using, would not support a 24-hour economy, even if we're in manufacturing?
Correct. And that's a fair point. So to the policymaker, you have to pay attention to some of these things. Okay, so let's go back to commercial associates. Well, if that particular printing machine cannot handle 24 hours of printing,
Pressure. Right.
Maybe commercial associates may want to replace that printing equipment. If you offer the right incentive in, let's say, in an appropriate tax break, they can either fix it or they can get a new
additional
one. Right?
ones.
So you just have to make sure that you approach it in a very integrated way. So if I'm going to go to commercial associates at midnight to work, I also have to think about my personal security.
Right.
Right. So you have to incorporate that into the policy.
Right.
In case that the lights go off, it means that I have to buy fuel to
Standby generator.
right. Maybe if I want to use a generator. So are you thinking about how you link the policy in an integrated way to make sure that every facet or every step of the way we are all in sync? Because if we do it in a very coordinated way, I don't see why then we shouldn't be able to reduce some of the challenges that, definitely I'm sure would prop up when such a policy is implemented.
Okay. What is not in short supply is talent or persons. So for the 24-hour economy, I can confidently say that we have the people, because there are a lot more people who are not working, all right? What is it that we lack?
When I interviewed former President Kufuor for, I wrote a book about him. Right. One of the things he said, because I asked him about why job creation continues to be one of the major challenges. And one of the things he said was the demand for jobs far outpaces the supply of jobs.
Right.
So one of the things that, as a government, you have to constantly think about is, how can we increase the supply of jobs? Now, he educated me to say, look, government can't do all of it, right? There's so much space within the public sector that government can employ. That's why you tend to the private sector where people have ideas, energies, creativity, but sometimes may lack, maybe enough capital, may lack other kinds of resources that gets them going. Because Ghanaians are very creative. Ghanaians would do what they have to do to engage in productive economic activities to get by, right? Even if they have to stand in the rain, the sun, they'll try and, make ends meet. So as you said, we don't lack persons. We don't lack persons with creativity, with ideas, with energies where they want to work and do something productive. But it's the supply side of the jobs. So if you, as a government, can find a way to incentivize those who create the jobs, to increase the supply of those jobs, you may not get to full employment where 100% everybody is employed. But if you can reduce the unemployment headaches, because unemployment also has challenges for other social issues.
Right.
So again, if you can expand the supply, then that's what we'll have to do. But that's a key component that is missing when we are trying to figure out, look, how do we tackle this perennial problem of unemployment?
Will it be expensive? Earlier you made the point about the fact that government cannot create all the jobs. It's a well-known fact, yes, the private sector. But I'm looking at the state of our economy now and how much we owe. We've defaulted on our debts. And then this proposal comes in. It's exciting, but do we have the capabilities in terms of resources, financial, I'm talking about cash, to be able to say we are expanding our economy? Or what is the cost of not even attempting to implement a 24-hour economy?
So on the first question,
right?
So when the the former president says, look, we'll provide certain tax incentives. Right. Well, when you do tax incentives, then it means that, let's say, if government is going to tax you at 25%, they decide, you know what, to incentivize you, I'll reduce your tax burden to maybe 22, 21, 20. Right. It means that all of a sudden there's that 4% loss of
shortfall in their revenue,
which means that government then would have to reprioritize certain things to say, now that 4% won't come in anymore. So are there other places where I spend money that I can re-strategize and reprioritize? Because no public policy is free. Nothing comes for free, right? So so then how do you deal with that aspect of it to make sure that but then again, if you are losing 4% in expected tax revenue, but then imagine if the economy itself is booming, right? That you're generating enough economic activity, even at that reduced tax burden rate, you'll still be able to make that shortfall, right? So again, this is all other things being equal, as like my friends in economics would say. All other things are never equal, but there are ways that I believe you can craft policy in such a way that you can generate positive returns on it.
Okay. There have been a lot of talks about, a lot of commentary from persons who are supposed to know better. The Vice President, Dr. Mahmoud Bawumia, has been on a campaign trail, literally, and bastardizing, for want of a better word, bastardizing the 24-hour economic policy by the former president. He hasn't told us what he would do differently or what the alternative policy is. He simply said he has better ideas, he has a new vision, and he keeps, going on and on and on about it. After the break, I would want Dr. Osae Kwapon to respond to some of the comments in fact, the first comment which you saw earlier, we played the video and so you saw that earlier, about Dr. Mahmoud Bawumia, who is Vice President, who is the chair of the Economic Management Team, under whose leadership the current crisis sits, bastardizing this policy and what the implications is on his own campaign in an attempt to break the eight as the campaign, as the mantra for the NPP. We'll be right back.
Thank you for watching. Once again, if you have not yet subscribed, please subscribe, hit the notification bell, like and also share, and also comment as well. Thank you.
PENDREAM TV now, so far so good. Say open online portal e Ghana. Nipa share, nipa follow, nipa comment here. To my best of knowledge, without any biases, PENDREAM TV.